Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Today I'll be showing how to make the sound reacting text effect. Text will deform based on the volume and frequency of incoming audio. This is a common effect you can find in music videos and streaming wallpapers, but it can be done quite easily with Blender as well. By the way, UI and nodes might look a bit different since I've upgraded to version 4.3, but this effect can be done with previous versions as well. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, as soon as we get into Blender, we'll hop right into Geometry Nodes Layout, H select all, X to delete, Shift A, add mesh plane. Using numpad 7 and 5, go into top orthographic view. And today we won't be using spreadsheet, so we are going to change this to graph editor. Hide the side panel with N, then split the window to make a video sequencer on the bottom. Using control middle mouse button drag, we want to focus on just channel 1 since we're only going to be using one channel. Then go into view, enable the sync visible range for sequencer and also the graph editor. This way you can control both timeline at the same time, and they're going to be synced. Okay, right. Click on New for new Geometry Nodes map, then pin it, delete the group input, and add a string input instead. Type in test, pass it through strings to curve, then output. Today's effect is going to be a sound reacting effect, which there's going to be spikes coming out of this text and it's going to react to the volume. Alright, so let's get started. We'll first start off by resampling. Okay. Change the count to lengths and set the value to 0.005. You're going to have a little bit more points than usual. Then let's realize the instance. And since we're going to be controlling the points, we're going to use set position. Alright. Next, let's go ahead and add a normal. And from normal, we're going to use a vector mass scale and scale it by 0.05 and plug it into offset, like so. The text is going to puff up like this, but we're going to turn these puff into spikes by using a noise texture. Change the dimension from 3D to 1D and turn off normalize, then change the scale to 1. Next, let's add an index and use a multiply to multiply it by 0.1 and plug it into W, like so. Okay. Then from noise texture factor, I'm going to use another multiply, and using the same value as a scale, 0.05, I'm going to plug this into scale, like so. Now it's all jaggedy, so what we want to do is control the amplitude of these spikes, but before we do that, let's make it a little bit more interesting by adding a mass node here after the multiply and connect the value to scene time. And let's also duplicate this multiply and change the value to 1 right here. Okay. So if I were to run the animation now, you can see the spikes moving around the text, but it's kind of hard to see what's written right now. So what I'm going to do is add another mass node after the multiply, then change the operation to max and max it with 0. Okay. So now you can see this, the text is still intact and the spike is moving, hovering above or around the text, like so. Okay. Right, let's now fill the text right here so it becomes a mesh. And right between the multiply and maximum, I'm gonna add another multiply right here and multiply it by 1. Okay. Next, from here to here, just before maximum, I'm gonna select these and Control G to group it. What I'm going to be doing is changing these multiply values into group inputs arguments. So let's pull out a group input from top left multiply. Open up the side panel with N, and I'm going to change this name to wave frequency. Okay. The next one, the left bottom one, is going to be, this is going to be the rotation speed. The next one right here is going to be the base amplitude. Okay. And the last one is going to be the input for the sound. So this one is going to be the sound gain. Right. So it's like this. Let's tab out and call this node group make wave. Right. So we're kind of ready to now get the sound file in. So let's go back to frame 1, and in order to get the sound file, I'm just gonna drag and drop the MP3 I made and pop it into the sequencer like so. You can adjust the position with G, and if you hold down Control, it's gonna snap to the cursor position or the current frame, like so. Alright, what I can do now is select the strip, then go to View and Range, then set frame range to strip. What this will do is it's going to adjust the animation lengths to the lengths of the strip. Okay, so it's now adjusted. Alright, so if I were to play the animation now, we can hear the sound coming out from this file. Great. So I want the data from this clip coming into geometry nodes, but we can't do that directly yet. So we'll need the interim object. So what I'm going to do is in the 3D viewport, I'm going to do Shift A, add empty plane axes. So this is going to be the middle object. Then in the side panel above the location, right click and insert keyframe. Make sure you insert it at frame 1. And next, what I'm going to do is go to the graph editor, open up the object transformation, and only select X location. Then from channel, go to sound to samples. Now let's look for the file that we just dragged in, and this is my file. So select this one. Then on the side we have all these settings. The top two are the frequency settings, the upper and lower limit. Attack time basically means a delay until the sound becomes a data. Then release time is a hold time after the sound disappears. For this effect, I want the attack time to be 0, so there's no delay for the effect. So I'm going to set the attack time to 0. Then click on sound to samples. Right. What we see now is the sound volume right now baked on top of the X location data. So if I were to drag and drop the empty into here, from location, I'm going to separate XYZ, then use the X and plug it into the sound gain into make wave. And if I were to run the animation, now we can see the spikes are growing based on the volume of the audio file. Okay. But it's not that interesting right now, so what I'm going to do is split the effect based on the sound frequency range, or the sound range. I'm gonna split it into the low frequency, mid frequency, and high frequency range. So in order to do that, let's go back to frame 1, reselect X location, go to channel, sound samples, and I'm gonna set the highest frequency to 200. So this is gonna be between 0 and 200 Hertz, which is a low frequency range. So I click on sound to samples, then select Y location, sound to samples. Next is going to be the mid range. It's going to be 200 to 2000. Sound to samples, and select Z. Do the same thing, but from 2000 to, let's say, 20,000. The higher frequency range is above 2000, so whatever the highest value you can come up with, it's fine. Sound samples. So we now have 3 data right here. So low, mid, high. Okay. So let's duplicate this make wave with Shift D. Bring it down. There's going to be 2 more right here. And connect Y into sound gain of the second one and Z into the third one. And change the wave frequency. So the low frequency range, I'm going to set it to 0.01. Mid range, I'm going to set it to 0.1 as it is, and I'm going to set the high range to 0.9. The reason why I don't use 1 is whenever noise texture goes through an integer, it basically becomes 0. So I don't want that happening, so I'm just using 0.9 instead. Okay. With that done, let's add them together by using a mass add. Add the mid-range, and also let's add the high noise range. Okay, like so. Right. So if I were to run the animation now, you can see there's a different size of spikes and bounces. So whenever there's a huge bass hit, like maybe here, you'll have some huge bump coming out like that, and rest is going to be high range and mid range. Okay, let's take a look. Like this. But what I notice is that this sound file has a lot of mid range, but not too much of a high range. So I'm just gonna adjust the bass amplitude so we can see a little bit more of a high range and less of mid range. I'm gonna change the amplitude to 0.02 for mid, and for the high range, I'm going to change it to 0.15 to make it a little bit more excessive, or make it a little bit more appearing. Right? So I think this looks a little bit better. Right? You can see there's a lot of bass coming out and high frequency range as well. Alright, cool. So I'm not going to be making any materials today, so let's kind of see what we just made. this is the overview. It's a pretty simple point control with set position. And let's go into make wave. Alright, here's the make wave part. Make sure you turn off this normalize. Alright. Okay, so this effect you see a lot in things like music videos or streaming displays and things like that. It's a pretty useful effect, I believe. It's kind of nice, so I hope you get a chance to use it. Alright, thank you for watching and see you next time.